How much time do we need to feel happier? There's such thing as having too much time.
I came in hot, a minute late, scrambling for what I felt like was not enough time.
Those with less than approximately 2 hours of discretionary time in the day were less happy.
That is, 100%.
Those with more than approximately 5 hours of discretionary time in the day, they were also less happy. It's not about quantity of time. It's really about the quality of the time.
Well, Cassie, it is fun to have you on. I do have to sort of disclose that I came in hot, a minute late, scrambling for what I felt like was not enough time as I'm interviewing somebody who talks about time and happiness. So it's a little unnerving, embarrassing, all of those things. But thanks so much for joining me. This is going to be awesome.
Well, do not apologize. We are all, this is what got me into this work, is because I'm always late and rushed and overwhelmed by how little time. So not to worry.
Oh, well, you're sweet. Well, let's sort of start there. What made you sort of dive in so deep, right, to these two, to time and to happiness? And now you're obviously an unbelievable professor. Your classes are overloaded. You speak, a remarkable thought leader, researcher, and brilliant. But you've dug into this, right? Time and happiness. Was there like a moment, right, where it was there was a problem and you thought, I'm going to dig into this really hardcore?
Yeah, there were sort of two layers of it. One that initially started me thinking about time as a resource that's really important, as I was a PhD student at a business school at Stanford, where there was so much focus on money as that sort of not only resource but goal. And I'm like, wait, time seems to be the biggest issue. And so then I started studying that, but it wasn't until later, when I was an assistant professor at Wharton, and I share this story in the opening of my book because it was very much a sort of pivotal and critical moment for me, where it was this just sort of hitting a wall of exhaustion. And I had these back-to-back meetings, giving a talk in New York, more meetings, rushing to this train, the very last one that would get me home to my 4-month-old and my husband asleep in Philly. And I did make the train that night, but barely. And I was just sunk into my seat, totally exhausted. And I was just like, I don't know if I can keep up, right? Between the pressures of work, being a good parent, being a good friend, the never-ending pile of chores, there were not enough hours in the day to get it all done. And so it was at that moment, which I know that many people have, of like just this idea that like it's too much, something's got to give, and maybe everything's got to give. Namely, like, I'm like, I gotta quit. Like, I'm just going to quit my job, with this idea that, like, if I had more time, then I would be happier. But fortunately, actually, with my history of studying time and happiness, I was like, well, actually, this is an empirical question, right? Before I quit, like, is there an answer to that sort of idea that if I had more time, then I'll be happier? I didn't quit. And instead, I sort of redirected my research agenda to answer these questions of how much time do we need to feel happier? And then the answer for that, which we can get in, is it's not about quantity of time. It's really about the quality of the time, where we invest our time, how we're invested during those times. But then I also wanted to answer those questions of how should we be spending and investing our time so that we don't look back on our weeks and feel totally exhausted and disconnected, so that we don't look back on our years feeling regret, having sort of run through our lives in this blur. And I have since, so that was 13 years ago, and I know because my 4-month-old son is now 13. Since then, I have done a lot of research, but I've also read and sort of been gathering the research by my colleagues in the fields of psychology and organizational behavior and behavioral decision making to sort of really get at these questions. And about 6 years ago, it was pre-COVID, I remember, I developed this course, sort of pulling all of these findings together. And I've been teaching this course, Applying the Science of Happiness to Life Design, that I've been teaching to my MBAs, executive MBAs, and seeing the impact of these learnings on my students, both during the quarter together, the 10 weeks together, but also hearing from them years after the course of how impactful these science-backed insights and, like motivated behaviors and ways of thinking, ways of spending time, how positive they can be in their lives. That's when I was approached to write the book. I was like, yes, because not everyone can get into my 10-week course, getting an MBA at UCLA Anderson. And so it's been so rewarding now to hear from readers of like, oh my gosh, these insights, and different insights for different people, but how it has really helped them engage with their time better.
Yeah, and I want to unpack some of those insights because I mean, I think like so many great ideas, like so many really great products, great material in the world, the result of, seeing a gap, feeling a gap even in our own lives, and then, digging into it to close it, and then hopefully helping others do the same. And I think it's really interesting. You sort of talk about like time poverty, right? Which is this term that you really lean into a lot. And I thought it was interesting because you sort of say it's a feeling. It's not a reality.
Yeah, what time poverty is the definition is that acute feeling of having too much to do and not enough time to do it. And this is something that I've been studying to look at. Well, actually, historically, it was measured more objectively. So labor economists would measure how much time is someone spending working in their day, with this assumption that anytime you're not spending on paid labor, then that is free time. Not true, right? So then other economists were like, well, let's also incorporate these other obligations of like the amount of time, number of hours in the day someone is spending on housework. So these other obligations. But even when you're doing those calculations on what are these obligations, there is question of like, well, what counts for an obligation, as well as what's the required amount of time versus people going above and beyond. And really what matters is people's subjective experience of not having enough hours in the day to be able to do what they set out to do. And those expectations are set by oneself, right? And so given that it is this feeling is helpful in many ways, because it means that not dismissing it as something that's not real, but it is recognizing that maybe we have some more control than we might have thought, both in terms of thinking about what are those tasks or things that we take on as obligations, because we do, again, have more perhaps control of that than we think. But then also like, how do we manage, not even manage, but experience the time that is not spent on these obligations to make them feel really rich and like enough, right? And so we've been studying time poverty, looking at data in the US. And so we have found that a little bit more than we found 53% of Americans feel time poor. And at first I was like, only 53%.
Yeah, that's what comes up for me.
Yeah. It's
totally.
Like, as I'm teaching MBAs, executive MBAs in professional sort of settings, like more like 95% of people feel time poor, right? But notably, this includes retirees, includes those who are outside of the workforce for many different reasons. So we were looking at, okay, well, who is most susceptible to this? Looking at the demographic variables, there are gender differences. So women tend to feel more time poor than men. Parents, particularly if they have young children, and if their partner works, or if they're parents with young children and don't have a partner, so they are single and they are working, feel particularly temporally impoverished, which I will also say absolutely all of these sort of demographic um, findings very much validated me on the train that night. Here I am, working full time. I have a baby, a partner who's working full time.
Yeah.
If you look within a household, why is it that a woman tends to feel that sort of time
Sure.
pressure more than men, even if both are working? And then that's where you get into these expectations, whether they are set on you by yourself,
Right.
of
Right.
like what we take on, whether they're set on us from others because we are asked more. And so there is
Right.
research, and I didn't actually go into this much in the book, but there is research like within academia, for instance, that women academics are asked to serve more on committees, which is not promotional work,
Interesting.
because they're more likely to say yes, and we do a good job. But as a consequence,
Yeah.
it makes it so that we're not spending that time on publishing research. Then when you go out for promotion, that's the thing that actually gets captured. So it's what we take on. But I also think with this realm of social media where you're constantly seeing what everything else that everyone else is doing, their like
Totally.
wonderful vacations, but also their incredible accomplishments, that is making us feel like, oh my gosh, I should be doing that too. And also even having our phones where we can do tasks at all times, it's
Right.
also
Right.
like affecting our expectations of what we could or should be
Yeah.
doing, because we're like, oh, if you're sitting watching your kid playing sports, it's like, oh, I could also be ordering the groceries. I could also be, like responding to these work emails. So there is this like constant influx of ways that we could/should be spending our time, and that's driving our expectations as well as how well we want to do in them.
Right.
So
Right.
it's these pressures
Right.
that made me want to study this and be like,
Yes.
okay, well, what are the ways of spending that actually make us feel more time poor? And that's what we're starting to look at now. We're also looking at what are the consequences of it. How can, once we know what are the sort of inputs into it, how can we spend or sort of think about our time or approach it to alleviate that sense of time poverty? Because the consequences of it are bad. Like we see that
Yep.
when people feel time poor, they're less healthy. They are less likely to exercise. They sleep less. They eat fast food because it's fast, not because it's healthy. It makes us less nice, right? When we're in a hurry, we are
Sure.
not likely to slow down and help others out. Here, when I feel like I'm in a hurry, I'm yelling at my kids. There are other ways I could talk to my kids. And it also makes us less happy. And we see it's the heightened levels of
Wow.
stress that comes from feeling time poor that makes us less happy. But the answer
But
for, well, okay, then is it about having a whole lot more time that would make us happier? And the answer to that is no. And we analyze data from the American Time Use Survey, so we can see across tens of thousands of working as well as
wow.
non-working Americans how they spent a day. And from that, we could calculate how much time they spend on discretionary activities and then relate that to their own reported life satisfaction, their happiness.
Wow.
From that, we saw this sort of inverted U shape, like an arc or a rainbow, which is interesting. So it means that happiness goes down on both ends of the spectrum. So yes, people with too little time. So what we saw in this data is actually really interesting, and it was an upside down U shape, like an arc or a rainbow, which is really interesting because it means that happiness goes down on both ends of the spectrum. So we saw that those with less than, in this data, approximately 2 hours of discretionary time in the day, they were less happy, right? These are the time poor folks, people. Like these are the
Okay.
ones who feel high levels of stress, less happy because they have too little time to spend on their discretionary activities, right? And then, interesting, on this other side, we saw that those with more than approximately 5 hours of discretionary time in the day, they were also less happy. And that's the surprising thing,
Wow.
because right on the train, when I'm like, oh my God, the answer is to quit everything and go like live on a sunny island
Right.
somewhere.
Uh-huh.
The answer is no,
Right.
because there's such thing as having too much time. And this is really important because it does caution us when we are feeling really time poor, the answer isn't to quit everything. It also cautions, I have my MBAs and executive MBAs where for many of them, it's sort of this idea, like if only I work my butt off and I retire early, then I will have all the time to spend however I want it and then I'll be happier. But this data and also other data is actually suggestive that retirement isn't the answer for greater happiness. And the reason for that is because when we are spending all the hours of the day in and day out, with nothing to show for it, it undermines our sense of purpose. So that lacking sense of purpose, which for many of us really does come from the work that we do, the impact that we're having professionally. And it doesn't have to just come from, paid work. It can come from other sources. But having purpose and a sense of productivity it doesn't have to be the entire day, but it is suggestive that you need at least a few hours each day to have that sense of productivity and purpose. And from that, we feel more satisfied. And it was interesting because even in this data, we saw that the way people spent their discretionary time mattered. So in the too much time, it actually went down when people were spending that discretionary time on these passive leisure, like relaxing. But when they were spending their discretionary time, whether it was social connection, like connecting with others, then you didn't see a drop off. It was sort of like,
wow, yeah,
you won't have a too much time effect. Or if you're spending your discretionary time on what was like productive discretionary activities, which according to the sample of participants was exercise, engaging in hobbies where you are learning, developing, working towards something, volunteer work where you're having that impact. You also didn't see this too much time effect. So I guess not to say that not working for pay is going to make you unhappy, but it is absolutely saying that when you even have a lot of available time, that you have a lot of control over how you spend it, it's that connection, it's that sense of purpose, that productivity that we really need in our lives. Same with, among those who have too little time, it's really the answer for those folks too is to sort of find those places and recognizing where they're spending that gives them that sense of purpose and productivity, where they're spending that really gives that sense of connection, that it isn't necessarily always showing up to the cocktail party if that's not a source of connection. And it also, a lot of my data points to that it's not about quantity of time, either how much you have available or how much you spend on any activity, it's the quality. So even when you're spending, say, with, your daughter, it's not that it needs to be 20 hours a week to have that wonderful relationship, but when it is that half hour in a day of like you fully showing up and that they feel it, then that 30 minutes has a really big effect. So those are, we can sort of talk more about any of these.
No, things. This is awesome. I mean, because I hear you so deeply. I mean, it's so true. I mean, I feel like, so what I'm hearing you say is that when we've got 2 hours a day that we can play with, right? That 2 hours is spent doing something that is something that we enjoy, that sort of fills our bucket. Maybe it's whatever that might be. That's connection, that's purpose, that's progress. That's sort of the formula around mitigating time poverty. But yet, if we have over 5 hours of sort of nebulous time, if you will, that in fact is the other end of the rainbow and the bell curve. And that in fact is a recipe for not feeling fulfilled and happy and life satisfaction. Is that, did I summarize that? I mean, I'm just trying to, because I'm personally thinking about myself, my own life, my family. And then I'm thinking about my 89-year-old dad and my 84-year-old mom who, fortunately they haven't learned about your incredible work and your brilliance But what I love is that they wake up and they, we try to do one thing every day, honey, like whatever that might be. And that feels important for someone who's retired. So did I summarize sort of that right as we think about as people are listening, where they show up in the world and in their own lives, how to think about it and structure their lives a little better for more satisfaction?
Yeah. And it's, you don't totally need to hang your hat on like the 2 and 5 hours. Well, that's where we sort of saw on that data, it coming out. I do think I've sort of held on to those. I'm like, it's 2 hours. But I will also say, at first I was like, 2 hours? There is no way in the world. I was like, 2 hours is so out of reach. It like seemed like this unreachable luxury of having 2 discretionary hours. But then when I did an honest accounting of my time, I was like, well, actually, I'm already spending time, like even back during that really hectic period of my life where as a, tenure track assistant professor working my butt off with this new baby, I would still have like the 15 minutes before the day started snuggling with the little guy. I
love it.
Was talking to my best friend on my commute home from work. I was still, even though sat down with my husband for 30 minutes, for dinner with a glass of wine. And of course we'd like it more than 30 minutes, but that's what we had. And then I would get to sing my baby to sleep at night. And that amounted to 90 minutes that I wouldn't have wanted to spend in any other way. And so it's not like finding a new 2 hours that isn't there. It is actually looking in the time that we're spending, where are these sources of joy? And so often we actually overlook them because of different factors. One is hedonic adaptation. So this is our psychological propensity to get used to things over the time. So when you do the same thing again and again, when you're with the same person again and again, they stop having as intense of an emotional impact on us. So we stop even noticing them so much. So you find someone who you love enough that you want to marry, right? And then just a couple
then you
years
pass them in the
on,
hallway. You're like, no, I'm kidding.
You barely notice them. You're like, oh, another person in my house.
Hey, speak for yourself, girl. I mean, I'm kidding. No, I hear you. Right. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but that comes from a lack of attention, because there is this person that you love so much who is right there in your life.
Right.
And there are these times that are so good, but we are very, we don't notice them because of hedonic adaptation. So and it's good that we hedonically adapt for bad stuff because it makes us resilient. So when you're
hedonic, you've got to define that word for me. I don't have 100 degrees like you, girl. I mean,
what is it? Hedonic is your emotional reaction. So it sort of, you might think of it as hedonism because it's your emotional reaction, but
Should I admit that I didn't know that?
No, it's great.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked, because I'm sure lots of people are like, what?
Okay. I don't know if I should admit that or not, but okay. Well, and would you also, I mean, what is that? That sort of feels a little bit in line with that we feel like they're always going to be there. Yeah. And we take that for granted, but the connection to time is the fact that they're always going to be there, kind of a mindset, which makes us pay less attention to it than probably it deserves, or we should.
And so the way to, and then I will also say in my research, when I met, I'm exploring what are those experiences that contribute most to our happiness, it is these really ordinary things in our lives. So people, if even for you, if you're thinking back in your last 3 weeks, what were those happiest moments? They are really these mundane things. It is at the kitchen table, with it's really mundane. And it's because they're so everyday that we assume that they will continue to happen every day. And so that also makes it so we stop noticing. So to keep us noticing, one thing is that we can increase variety. You can take a break. These are ways to offset hedonic adaptation. But another is to count your times left. And so this is a really powerful, as well as sort of like tear provoking exercise of counting the times left you have to do this thing with the person that you love in the way that you're doing it, right? So my coffee dates with my daughter, I've shared this example, and it continues to motivate me to make the most of these times. So my daughter is now 10. We've been going on weekly coffee dates since she was 4, and I was dropping her off at preschool and needed caffeine on my way into work. But she has hot chocolate. Don't worry, I'm not caffeinating my daughter. But I calculated, so we've gone on about 400 coffee dates together. And then I was like, okay, how many coffee dates will we be going on together in the future, accounting for the fact that if she's anything like my 13-year-old son, she's not going to want to go to the coffee shop with me in a couple of years. She's going to want to go with her friends. So say we go once a month instead of every week. And then she's going to go off to college. And then she's going to move to New York, whatever.
Right.
And so I calculated that Lita and I have approximately 36% of our coffee dates left in our entire life, and she's only 10. Wow. And so what that motivates me to do is to make the time, no matter how busy, that 30 minutes, I absolutely show up, and I am paying attention. My phone is away. I am, that to-do list that otherwise is constantly running. I'm just like in it with her, and it's our time together. And it's only 30 minutes, but those 30 minutes have like a really big effect on how I feel in my day and about my lives. And like, I also look forward to them. We like talk about them afterwards. So it's not just during the time that we're spending. And this counting times left has been like when my students do it, I mean, there's lots of different examples, but counting times left of dinner with their parents, recognizing that they maybe don't live in the same place, or even if they have Sunday dinners, but often they cancel them because everything, other things are going on, or they show up and they're like annoyed by whatever it is. But when they count the times left, it totally makes them show up, and it changes how they show up, right? That it is really open to those conversations of like the little stuff rolls off the back, the annoyances, because at that time it's precious. As well as really digging into those conversations of really appreciating the people. And this is getting back to, we talked earlier about time poverty as this negative experience of having too little time, but that's really about thinking about the hours of our life. But when we zoom out and we think about the years of our life, then there's actually benefits of recognizing that our years are limited, because then that motivates us to make more of our hours today. It really motivates us to carve out time for those things that matter, those activities that give us that sense of purpose, those people that really matter to us. And then, of course, there's so much other stuff that fills our lives. But if we just prioritize, carve out some time for these things that matter, then it's okay if we're busy with the rest. And this way, we don't look back with regret. This way, we continue to have that sense of excitement and fulfillment from the, busy schedules that we have.
100. No, I think it's so cool in the book how you talk about, you can sort of zoom out, right, and look at it through that lens of decades, if you will, and then you can really zoom in and sort of look at it through that lens of hours and days. And I think it's so interesting because I think I read somewhere, and you may have written this, right, but that I think the data shows that if everybody had another hour in the day, they would spend it doing more of what they're already doing, not exercising, the thing that maybe they say they don't have time for. I'm curious, it's interesting I do a program for women leaders, and, it's so interesting because I hear this sometimes from corporations and people inside of corporations where there's a culture where if you have time blocked on your calendar, people schedule over it.
It's so annoying. and so awful.
100%. I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. But I totally, and I think, and I've said it that directly to an executive or a C-suite person, but also I see the person that's rolling up into the person that is doing those kinds of things for them, where they're not only are they scheduling over it, but then they're getting another schedule over that. So they're supposed to be in two totally separate. How do you coach somebody who says, "Hey, I hear you, but I've tried to manage up on this. Yeah. What do I do about this?" Because I mean, those are just sort of, real life situations that I think, people are throwing these curveballs, and in the business world, right? Like, how does that work? Or even in personal lives, how do you coach somebody up on that?
Yeah, and it is hard because it's like what I'm, sort of asserting is that we have more control than we think in how we spend our time. But then there are these other sort of factors that take away the control around our time. And so even if you are informed with your best intentions and you're prioritizing what matters, that doesn't mean that the people around you will support you in that way. Just as actually a little note on this is in data that we're collecting or analyzing right now, when I was saying we're looking at what are the ways that people spend their time in their day that influence how time poor they feel at the end of their day. With that, what are those ways of spending that make people feel more time poor? And what we saw is a really interesting effect where spending your day on more categories of activities makes people feel more time poor, but spending on more activities doesn't. So it's actually the switching of roles. So if you do a lot of work tasks in a day, that's not what's going to make you feel time poor. It is doing work tasks and personal errands and trying to be socially connecting and, with your family and socializing.
Sure.
So, which is interesting because, and the thing that we're trying to sort of put forth of an implication of this is how do we actually even from an organizational standpoint structure the work week, recognizing that the switching between domains is actually where you get exhausted. Where things fall apart. Yeah, it's exhausting, but also you have transition costs, so you're not even as productive because you're transitioning between domains. And so I actually think that this data is very supportive of the 4-10 work week where, and I know that there are some organizations that are starting to do this where you have longer work days, but for 4 days. And then what that does is it frees up a day during the work week for all those doctor's appointments, the errands, the other stuff, so that you're not trying to sort of fit those into the week. And then it makes it very clear what is your sort of personal social time. So that, because across a week, we can absolutely switch in domains, but within a day, that's where you see the tax.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so
I feel that personally. I mean, I do. I think I hear you, and I think it's in addition to the gap in productivity because of the switching of tasks. I also find that, and your data may show, I mean, it's you're physically more tired, you're more exhausted from sort of this. And I had Cal Newport on, who wrote a book called Deep Work and does a lot of time blocking, which I think you sort of in so many ways I think you're a fan of that. I would think
absolutely.
But how do you? I mean, because the way that people work today, it's horribly designed from the perspective that efficiency is sort of what is valued, if you will. Busyness is a signal of, but yet, and the ability to get a lot done and a lot of that is sort of this gold standard, but it's not sustainable. I would argue, although you would know better than me, and it's exhausting, and we're probably minimizing how effective we are.
Totally, yeah. And I was going to say it is the sort of way that people think, but shouldn't be the gold standard because efficiency is about doing more and more quickly, but it is not even taking into any account the outcome of what you're doing. And
Right.
so what we care about are outcomes, right? What we
Yep.
care about is
Yep.
what is actually produced, not
Right.
the hours of work or the way that we're working going into those outcomes.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
that actually might be my response to, um, and I
The
know
person that's
that
getting
it's sort of hard
scheduled over
to
the
do,
schedule.
is the coaching of like the individual being very clear on what is it that their goals are, the outcome goals in their work, and being clear on like, okay, once they know, and I frame it as one's purpose, which I suspect you've probably had guests on that talk about
Sure.
knowing your why and
Totally.
aligning your why with the work that you're
Yep.
doing, right?
Sure.
But when you
Yep.
know your purpose or your the outcomes of these goals that are important for the work that you're doing, it's really helpful of like, what do you say yes to, what do you say no to, and it can also, you can communicate that to the people who are scheduling your time, of being like, what we really want, or what, or
Right.
even what you want from me is to produce X.
Right. Right.
By having this meeting, it's actually hurting my ability to. And then because producing X also requires that we are blocking time for these other sources of fuel, in ourselves.
Sure.
And the
Sure.
sustainability. They don't just want, you know, losing employees is very costly. And then trying to recruit and retain
Sure.
is absolutely something that folks need to keep in mind. And so helping
Yeah.
managers or be more sort of farsighted of like, you want me to stay around and you want me to produce good
Right.
work.
Right.
This is the way that can stick around and produce the work that you want too. And
Yep.
so I think
Yep.
that it's not about how people are spending time as their source of productivity, but it's what comes out of that time. And what comes out of that time absolutely requires us to be fueled by these, things that fuel us, that connection, that doing the work that is actually worthwhile, not all the sort of noisy, sandy stuff that just sort of fills our schedule because of inertia.
Yep.
And so there is this sort of proactive approach to our time,
Yep.
informed by when you step back, thinking about those years, informed by that, what matters to you? What are your values, your higher arching, higher order goals, your purpose?
Sure.
And
Sure.
then with that perspective, then you come back into those hours and how you are going to sort of dedicate your hours today.
How do you, I mean, one of the things I hear so often from leaders is that they're getting pulled down. This is sort of what I hear, pulling down to the urgent, but the less important, the unimportant. They're solving problems that could be solved by the people that work for them. And that is minimizing, obviously, their ability to spend the kind of time and energy and focus on some real needle mover work that maybe was intentionally or was previously, designed to be where they wanted to spend their time. It's with the activities that ladder up to the outcomes that they want. But the reacting, how do you think about that? How do you maybe coach people to find their way out of that?
Yeah.
It
And
appears
it
to be just it's a
requires,
problem.
totally, and it requires so much vigilance, because it is, so when we, in our data shows that when we feel time poor, it does make us more reactive. We are
Yeah.
just responding to what's urgent,
Yeah.
irrespective of how important. And so it is this taking a broader view of time where we see that when people are thinking about the years of their lives instead of the hours of today, then they have this lens of importance, not just urgency. And so by bringing in that importance, that is what sort of gives us the
Recenters.
strength to be
Okay.
really vigilant of being like, because in the moment, it's just easier to say yes to that
Yep.
person requesting your time. It's easier to say yes to that meeting. It's easier to like initially of being like fine, someone who's
Right.
working for you, you're like, I'll just do it, it'll be quicker. But
Right. Right.
that
No, but that's not healthy long term.
it isn't like, and it's absolutely, and if you have in the sort of forefront of your mind that it is absolutely taking away from what's important, then it's like, oh, I can feel okay saying no to that, or you will figure it out, because if you know what's important and you're like very clear, then it's like, okay, you're sort of on the mission towards that. And so it's even just sort of having that at the forefront in the mind that gives you the confidence. And it doesn't have to be mean in saying
Right.
no.
Sure.
I've actually found that there's ways of saying no that are really, I've always regretted when I share this, because then when I say no to people, then they're like, oh, you're doing it to me, Cassie. And I'm like, no. But if oftentimes we don't want to say no is because we are worried about that relationship, right? That we don't want to sort of somehow harm our ability, like their
Sure.
view of us, or
Sure.
ability that maybe we won't be asked again in the future.
Right.
So when you're saying no to something because it will take away that time from something that's important, if you sort of frame it as like yes, no, yes, so
Yeah.
then it actually feels not like a no. And so you're more likely to say no. Is like, so someone asks you to do something, and so the initial yes is like how awesome that is that they're doing it, and like how important and how much you would love to. And then the no, unfortunately, given your constraints or commitments, you can't do it now. And then you end with a yes, but like, I would love for you to keep me in mind in the future, and keep me posted on how the project goes in the future. Like, so you keep
Right.
you're saying no within a really sort of positive relational interaction.
Isn't that kind of called a shit sandwich?
Yeah, that's one way of saying it.
Okay, got it.
I don't like giving shit to people.
Yeah,
so I'll
sure.
Say within a
Yeah,
little,
no,
like,
right.
It makes
Well,
people
and
feel,
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and you know what? Like I recently was asked to serve on a board, and it was one of those things where when I really was intentional about looking at it and looking at the time involved, I knew for sure that I would find myself at a point where I wasn't going to be able to deliver against it at the level of commitment that it required, with the level of engagement that it required. And I sort of, and so I said no, but yes, maybe there's something that requires less time that I could be a part of. I would love to, but I think also I think when I think about, my husband and I have been married for 25 years. We have 3 daughters who are 23, 22, and 22 now. We had 3 in 12 months, which is another story. But obviously, but to me, that for women and who are working or not, but who are feeling that demand, I mean, I think it is remarkably difficult sometimes to say no. And I think one of the things that I because we know our children are really, and our spouse are just, they're our why in so many ways, I think, so often. And
Absolutely.
so hopefully, and so it feels like too, when I think about the way you say no, one of the things that I used to do that was helpful was if I said no to something, maybe it was a dinner with clients or a dinner or whatever it might be, I would shift in my mindset. I would say, I'm saying yes to reading my girls a story tonight. I'm saying yes to putting them to bed. I'm saying yes to laying with them and connecting. And that helps say no too, because I think it helps you think about what you're saying, actually saying yes to, which you probably before were clear mattered more, but that's hard to do. But I think that, I don't know if your research supports something like that, but to me, that's been helpful too. When it's really in your own head, not necessarily no externally, but no in your own head, and sorting through decisions and choices.
Absolutely, because the hours of our day are finite. And so you saying yes to that colleague dinner is saying no to reading your, your
When
putting
they were
your
young,
daughter
sure.
to bed. And so there's this analogy that I often touch back to, and it's really nicely shown in this film that I share in the first day of my course. And it's this professor who he puts this time or this jar in the front of the room, and then he pours golf balls into the jar up to the top. Is it full? No. Then he pours pebbles into the jar to the top. Is it full? No. And then he pours sand to the top. Is it full? And then it's like, no. Then he pulls out 2 bottles of beer, pours one into the jar. He takes the other one and opens it and takes a sip, and he explains this jar represents the time of your life. Those golf balls are the things that really matter to you. Your relationship with your family. So that time with your girls, that time with your husband, the part of the work that is so in line with your purpose. The pebbles are the other important things that you have to do, but the sand is everything else. The sand is all of that stuff that fills your time without you even thinking about it. And what's really important to note is that had he poured the sand into the jar first, all of the golf balls would not have fit. And that's to make the point that if you let your time get filled, it will absolutely get filled, but not necessarily with the things that matter to you. And so what you need to do is to protect time in your schedule for those golf balls. And again, it doesn't have to be a whole lot of time for them to have the effect, but it's protecting time for, for you, it was putting your kids to bed. For me, it's that 30, that coffee date with my daughter. For me, it is like a morning walk 1 day a week with the dog and my husband. And protecting time for those, because it is recognizing that sand will fill it. And by saying, letting the sand fill the time, then you are saying no to those golf balls, which is sort of your way of putting it. So it is,
which is the core.
Yeah, because there's a limited time. And so knowing what's important to you, protecting time for it, and that there's where you get the confidence to say no to those other things, because you know that ultimately then that would be saying no. If you said yes, and it's saying no to your golf balls, which you're not going to do, right? So.
Right, for sure. So if somebody was sitting down, and it was Sunday night and they were sort of beginning to think about their week, the next week, for example, and they're trying to sort of plan it out and make sure they're optimizing for the golf balls, essentially, what would you tell them to do differently?
I would even that in itself is pretty amazing, of like, with that vantage point of like before the week starts, before the sand starts filling,
right,
and before you're really reactive, of being like, okay, this week, what do I want to protect time for? And for like the workout, it's like, okay, it's really important to me that I get a run in. When am I going to put that in? And so putting it in your calendar. It's really important to me that I, and it's not necessarily blocking or scheduling your entire week. It is, though, like, what are those 3 things that are really important for you to do? Put them into your calendar, protect that time. And then what's also really nice about that is, like, not only are you protecting that time, but it also gets you excited for the week. Like, I know on Sunday nights, I'm super anxious because it's just sort of this sense of, like, what's to come. But then if I'm like, oh, but I have, Thursday afternoon walk with my husband, like, okay, it will be good. I'll get,
Right.
So just being very clear on what are those like 3 things that you want to protect your time for, and put them in your schedule. And then the rest, I mean, there's so many other things, but at least that will give you.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to me because honestly, Cassie, I wrote a book called The Energy Clock a few years ago, which was really a byproduct of an exercise and sort of a little bit like your Subway moment. And my mom was incredibly instrumental in sort of helping me look at that through the lens of time, but also energy. In other words, she said, Molly, what you've got to have the kind of energy you need for the moments that matter most. And so she really helped do that. And it morphed into literally the way that I try to live my life. It morphed into a book, a training program. I mean, all these things. But to me, it's also saying, looking at the things that give you energy in our lives. What are those things, right? And then looking at the things that drain your energy, and then getting really personally and professionally, looking at the things that are maybe neutrals, right? They're probably the sand, the emptying the dishwasher, the showers, the brushing your teeth. And then saying, okay, how do I go way out in my calendar and ensure that I protect those things that fill my cup up, that are maybe the golf balls potentially a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think what I'd be curious as to your take on is having the right kind of energy that you bring to the time that matters to you is essential, of course. Is there anything that your research shows around that? Because like you said, it's not about how much time, but how do you, through your research, think about ensuring you have the kind of energy for the time that you've identified as critical?
Yeah. And I love this question, because also noting that some of the ways we spend time give us energy. So it's not even like how you allocate energy, but also how that energy is going to sort of
totally
perpetuate and fuel itself. And in the second to last chapter of the book, or of my book, Happier Hour, after I share all the strategies and insights, then that second to last chapter is me actually giving these, how do you schedule your time so that the good stuff has the biggest effect, so you're minimizing the effect of the bad stuff. And one of the points I'm making is, even for those golf ball type activities, those things that give you energy, those activities that are so important to you, even placing them in a way that aligns with that particular type of energy. So for instance, for me, the time that I carve out to do my deep thinking work, I know that I'm a morning person. I know that actually I need to align that and that activity with the required cognitive energy. And so I protect time on my Monday morning. Don't take meetings during that time. But I also know that when I am hanging out with my husband, I am best when it's actually towards the end of the week, because earlier in the week I'm sort of in my go mode, and so it might be sort of all right, let's get on with it.
That's why the walk is on Thursday. That I just heard. It's Thursdays.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not Tuesday, honey. Yeah.
And so it is sort of knowing yourself, and also there's the research that shows, with the sleep research, that some of us do have more energy in the morning, some of us have more energy in the evening, and knowing that about ourselves also is information of where we put particular activities. So all to say, absolutely, I agree with you, Molly, that it's figuring out what's the right energy that fits that activity that is so important to you. And for me, afternoons, I'm useless. So that's when I do all my meetings and catching up on emails, because it's going to be not fun time anyway.
Right.
But also to this time poverty, getting back to that, there's a lot of, I ask people, what don't you have time to do that you wish you did? And that's really informative, because it shows oftentimes that they will share things that are things that they would love to do. And then there's I'm okay, where in the next 3 weeks, is there a time that you can do that? And then they're okay. And then they once they spend time in that way, it makes them feel like they have more time, because it gives them their energy. So we ran a study where we actually found that when people feel time poor, as I already shared, they're less likely to help others out because they don't feel like they have the time. But we ran experiments where we found that actually when people spent time to help someone, it made them feel like they had more time. And the reason that happened is because it made them feel really effective. They were oh my God, 30 minutes. Look at how much I actually accomplished. And then it gives this sense of how much you can accomplish more generally. And so again, to that sort of your point, that time poverty is a feeling, which is that it is influenced also by how we spend our time. So when you spend your time in something that fuels you, then it actually makes you feel like you have more time, because or gives you energy, because you're it lessens that sense of constraint. It gives you this sense of actually I can do what I set out to do. And through that self-efficacy, it makes you feel more time affluent. So it's a really sort of nice, positive cycle or dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I agree. I mean, this book is, and I'm holding it up, but some people are probably just listening, but at the back, there are so many cool tools and breakdowns that you pull through on the way to, writing your eulogy, right? Like I'm a big fan, all that, right? Your tombstone. I mean, all these, so powerful. So Cassie, this is awesome content. And the research, obviously, that you pour into it and support with your brilliance is absolutely remarkable. So thank you so much. Cassie, I end with rapid fire, so I'm going to hit you with a couple quick ones, though. Is that okay? I started to close the loop too quickly there.
Great.
So tell me what is something maybe that you're reading right now, or you're watching right now, or you're listening to right now that is making a really big impact on you and making you show up a little bit better in the world?
It might sound silly, but there's a show that I am loving right now, Man on the Inside. And it's with Ted Danson, and it is him as a retiree actually sort of becoming an investigator. And the reason I love it is because it is picking up on these themes of like what gives us that sense of productivity, purpose, connection at all stages of our lives. And it's delightful. So
wow, I love that. Him on the inside. All right, cool.
Man on the inside.
I'm sorry. Man on the inside. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's a piece of advice that you've received that's really, really stuck with you? Like that's just stuck with you?
This is, oh gosh.
Go there. Don't hold back on me, girl. Give it to me. I know what's going on. Give it to me.
You know what? It was my mother-in-law when we were having our first kid, and she's like, don't listen to anyone's advice. And it has stuck with me because initially I didn't follow it. I did not follow her advice to not listen to people's advice. But I think I have since come to follow the advice. And what I think it's actually saying is not to not listen to other people. I think it is to be more in tune to yourself and really follow your sense of what is right and good, and taking your own sort of broad view of time and having that fuel. Because I think there's we know a lot about ourselves if we pay attention.
Trust it. That's kind of cool. Did she ever give you any advice and you were like, hey, remember what you told me?
You told me.
Hey, park it, mother-in-law. I love that. Okay, so who or what is a game changer who inspires you and why?
I continue to be so grateful for my PhD advisor, Jennifer Ocker. She's a professor who's at Stanford. And she continues to be a fabulous mentor of not only supporting me in sort of my intellectual or sort of academic development, but she's also is very thoughtful and is like a fabulous mom, a really engaged wife. And as she's 10 years older than me, I get to watch what she's dealing with before I get there. And so I think just that mentorship I'm grateful for.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, and I mean, with your academic journey and academic accomplishments, I mean, you've bumped up against some remarkable people. Some I feel so blessed to have had on this show, but you're brilliant. I mean, you really. I was a little intimidated coming into this interview. I mean, it's.
And then you met me.
I was just a student athlete out of it. I mean, no. You're really cool for all of the resume. I mean, it's awesome. So, hey, thanks for spending time. With me and for our listeners. Really, really grateful. Thanks so much, Cassie.
Well, thank you. This was a treat.